The scream pierced through the Saturday morning rush at Julia's table like a knife cutting through silence. My packed bakery went completely silent. I turned from the espresso machine to see them, Victor and Marie, my parents, standing by the counter looking like they'd aged 20 years in the 12 since I'd last seen them. She feeds strangers gourmet food while her own parents starve. Victor's voice cracked with theatrical despair. His hands shook as he pointed directly at me. Marie sobbed beside him, her gray hair wild and unkempt, her clothes deliberately worn and ragged. Customers pulled out their phones. I watched myself go viral in real time. The tray of cherry danishes slipped from my trembling hands, ceramic shattering across the floor in 1,000 pieces. "Please," I whispered desperately, "not here." Marie lunged forward, knocking pastries off the display case with a sweep of her arm. "You owe us, Julia. We gave you life." I hadn't seen them since I was 26. Before that, since I was 16. My chest tightened painfully. Police sirens wailed outside. They'd called them before even coming in. An officer pushed through the door, took in the scene, shattered glass, weeping elderly couple, me frozen in my apron, and his expression hardened with judgment. "Ma'am," he said to me, his voice cold, "step away from them immediately." They detained me in my own office while officers took statements from my parents in the dining area. I sat behind my desk, the one I'd bought after my first profitable year, and tried to breathe steadily through the panic. My name is Julia. I'm 38 years old. I own this bakery that I built from absolutely nothing. I'm married to Mark, a good man who loves my croissants and never asks me to be anything but myself. I built this entire life from scratch with my own 2 hands. The officer finally came in, his face unreadable behind his professional mask. He didn't arrest me, but he handed me folded papers with an official stamp that made my stomach drop. "Temporary restraining order," he said flatly. "You can't remove them from the premises. They've claimed elderly endangerment and neglect." "What?" The word came out strangled and disbelieving. "They say you've been denying them food and shelter despite having clear means to provide it. They're staying in your lobby until this legal matter is sorted out properly." After he left, I stared at the papers with shaking hands. I was 16 again, coming home from school to an empty house. A sold sign in the front yard. A note on the kitchen counter in my mother's handwriting: "We need to find our joy. You're old enough to figure it out. Love, Mom and Dad." $500 in an envelope. That was everything they left me with. Mark arrived within 20 minutes of my panicked call. He found me still sitting at my desk, the restraining order crumpled in my fist. He knelt beside my chair and took my hand gently in his. "They're really out there?" he asked quietly, looking toward the door. I nodded, unable to speak. Through my office window, I could see them sitting in a corner booth, Marie accepting coffee from my assistant manager with a grateful, trembling smile that looked perfectly rehearsed. "This happened before," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "When I was 26 years old. Mark knew pieces of my story, but not everything. Not how I'd slept in a laundromat for 3 weeks after they left. Not how I'd showered in the YMCA and eaten from convenience store dumpsters until I finally found a job washing dishes at a diner. 10 years after abandoning me, they'd shown up at my studio apartment without warning. I was working 2 jobs, saving every penny for culinary school. They'd looked around at my tiny space, my thrift store furniture, and actually laughed at me like I was a joke. "See?" Victor had said with genuine amusement in his voice. "You're boring and predictable. We're going to Bali." Then they vanished again for another 12 years without a single word. Mark's jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. What do they want now? Before I could answer, he appeared in my doorway, Victor, holding a manila envelope with a prestigious law firm's logo printed on it. "From our lawyer," he said smugly, dropping it on my desk. "You'll want to read this very carefully." My business attorney, Ronald, went pale as he read the letter carefully. We sat in his office Monday morning, the weekend having passed in a blur of closed bakery and completely sleepless nights filled with anxiety. "Julia," Ronald said carefully, setting down his coffee cup with a trembling hand, "have you heard of filial responsibility laws?" I shook my head, a cold feeling of dread settling in my stomach. There are archaic statutes still on the books in about 30 states, including ours unfortunately. If parents are destitute and the adult child has financial means, the state can legally force the child to provide financial support, housing, medical care, basic needs. The room tilted sickeningly. That's completely insane. It's rare, but completely valid under current law. They're claiming zero assets and early onset dementia. Their lawyer is very good at this type of case. He set down the letter with shaking hands. "Julia, if you don't provide them housing tonight, you could face criminal neglect charges tomorrow." "They planned this entire thing," I whispered, understanding flooding through me. Ronald nodded grimly. Every single move was calculated. The public scene, the police report, the endangerment claim. They've built a case specifically designed to make you look like a monster if you resist. What do I do? For now. You house them somewhere. Anywhere. Tonight. We'll figure out the rest later, but you need to comply immediately. I drove them to the riverside in complete silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. It was a decent hotel, clean, comfortable, respectable 3 stars. I'd booked a room with 2 queen beds for 1 week while I figured out my next move. Victor sat in the front passenger seat, Marie in the back. As I pulled into the parking lot, Marie's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "We checked your financial disclosures online, Julia." Her frail elderly voice had vanished completely, replaced by something sharp. "That bakery pulls in 7 figures annually. You can definitely do better than a 3-star hotel." I stared at her in the rearview mirror with disbelief. She smirked back at me knowingly. "I'm not sure what you think is happening here," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady, "but this isn't going to work the way you planned." Victor laughed, a sound I remembered from my childhood. "We'll see about that, sweetheart." I handed them the key cards and drove away as quickly as I could. At the first red light, my phone buzzed, a credit card notification. Riverside and room service, $340. Another buzz almost immediately. Room service again, $180. I pulled over and called the hotel with shaking hands. I need to set a strict spending limit on room 237 immediately. But they'd already ordered champagne, lobster, and filet mignon. By Tuesday morning, I was the villain of our entire small town. A local news blog ran the headline, "Wealthy Baker Abandons Frail Parents." The article included multiple photos of Victor and Marie looking devastated outside my bakery, and detailed quotes about my heartless cruelty. My phone exploded with catering cancellations throughout the morning. A corporate client pulled a $15,000 wedding contract. 3 regular customers left scathing 1-star reviews mentioning my complete lack of family values. At noon, protesters arrived outside my bakery. 2 people with handmade signs, "Honor thy father and mother," and "Shame on Julia's table." Mark found me in the kitchen, crying over a batch of burned sourdough that I'd forgotten about completely. "They're destroying everything I built," I said through tears. He pulled me close, his arms steady and reassuring. "We'll fix this somehow. We'll find a way." But I'd already lost $30,000 in business. And it had only been 3 days. My phone rang loudly. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Julia." A woman's voice, professional and eager. "This is Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your side of the story about your parents. Are you available for an on-camera interview today? I hung up without responding. My hands were shaking uncontrollably again. Wednesday afternoon, I went to the hotel to negotiate directly. Maybe I could pay them off, buy a plane ticket to anywhere in the world, just make them disappear from my life forever. Victor answered the door in a plush hotel robe, a room service cart behind him loaded with empty plates. He looked completely comfortable and settled in. Come to discuss terms? He asked with a satisfied smile. I followed him inside reluctantly. Marie sat on the bed, her hair freshly styled at the hotel salon. She looked nothing like the broken woman who'd wept in my bakery. How much? I asked directly, cutting through the pretense. To make you leave permanently. Victor laughed loudly. He pulled a glossy brochure from the nightstand and handed it to me. Golden Horizons Luxury Assisted Living. I looked at the price list with growing horror. $12,000 per month. Per person. Plus a monthly stipend, Marie added casually, examining her new manicure. $5,000 should cover our personal expenses comfortably. You're absolutely insane, I whispered. We're your parents, Victor said simply. And we're prepared to sue for a lien on your business if you don't comply with our reasonable requests. We'll take everything you've built. The room spun around me. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated, cold extortion. I need to talk to my lawyer, I managed to say. Victor smiled wider. You do that, sweetheart. I fired Ronald that afternoon without hesitation. He was too soft, too focused on compliance and avoiding conflict. I needed someone who fought dirty and won cases. Elias Thorne's office was downtown, all glass and steel and intimidation. He was expensive, $500 an hour minimum, and his reputation preceded him throughout the state. He destroyed fraudsters for a living. I told him everything without holding back. He listened without interrupting once, his expression completely unreadable behind his expensive desk. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair thoughtfully. Don't pay them another cent until a judge officially orders it. We're going to audit their entire lives thoroughly. Can you legally do that? I can do a lot of things most lawyers can't. He made a note on his legal pad. But Julia, this will get significantly uglier before it gets better. They'll escalate their attacks. The press will get worse. You need to be mentally prepared for that reality. I don't have a choice anymore. No, he agreed, meeting my eyes directly. You don't. He slid a contract across his desk. Sign here. And understand, I don't lose cases. Ever. I signed without hesitation or second thought. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Victor and Marie played their parts perfectly, like experienced actors in a rehearsed show. Thursday evening, Marie collapsed in the hotel lobby dramatically. The ambulance arrived with sirens blaring loudly. Despite my anger, despite everything, my stomach dropped when Mark called to tell me what happened. I met them at the hospital emergency room. Marie was on a gurney, Victor hovering beside her, dabbing his eyes with a tissue for the nurses to see. She's been so stressed, he told the nurse loudly enough for others to hear. Her daughter refuses to care for us properly. I stood in the hallway, frozen and conflicted. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me was still that 16-year-old who believed parents were supposed to love you unconditionally. The ER doctor pulled me aside after an hour of running tests. There's nothing wrong with her heart, he said, flipping through her chart with obvious confusion. Blood pressure's fine. EKG completely normal. He paused awkwardly. She did ask if the hospital food includes lobster, though. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Almost. The financial freeze hit Friday morning without warning. Pending the court hearing, our accounts were locked. Thorne's strategy to prevent them from claiming I was hiding money. But it meant we couldn't pay our vendors immediately. My produce supplier called at 8 a.m. sharp. "Julia, I've got your order ready, but your payment bounced." "I'll fix it," I promised, but I didn't know how yet. Mark was supportive, but I saw the stress clearly etched in his face when he reviewed our mounting bills. The bakery ran on thin profit margins. We had 2 weeks before we couldn't make payroll for our employees. Saturday afternoon, I found Mark in our backyard, staring at the guest house we've been renovating for the past year. "What's wrong?" I asked, touching his shoulder gently. Victor was here earlier. Looking around. Taking measurements. Mark's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. He said, "This will do nicely once we win the case." Something cold settled in my chest. He came to our house. Said he wanted to see where his daughter lived. I couldn't legally stop him. There's no restraining order against them visiting our property. They weren't just attacking my business anymore. They were invading my home, my sanctuary, my safe space. Thorne called Monday morning with an important update. I'd been digging deep into their financials. I was at the bakery, trying to pretend everything was normal while my world collapsed around me. My head chef had quit over the weekend, citing the drama and bad publicity. I was down to 2 employees. They claimed they lost everything in a bad investment in Thailand, Thorne continued. Their bank statements show zero balance domestically. Everything checks out on paper perfectly. My heart sank with disappointment. So they're actually broke. Maybe. But I found something odd that doesn't fit. A recurring charge of $19.99 for the last 15 years straight. Storage unit in Nevada. Storage. People who've lost everything don't pay for storage, Thorne said thoughtfully. They sell what's in storage to survive. I'm sending someone to check it out today. After we hung up, I stared at the empty kitchen. My dream was collapsing around me, and I was powerless to stop it. By Wednesday, I'd reached my absolute breaking point completely. Another vendor had pulled service. 2 more employees quit, afraid of being associated with the growing scandal. My wedding season bookings, usually my biggest revenue, had dropped to absolutely nothing. I drafted a settlement offer at 2 in the morning, sitting alone at my kitchen table in the dark. I'd pay for a modest assisted living facility, $3,000 a month, if they'd sign away all future claims forever. I emailed it to Thorne at 2:47 a.m., my vision blurry with exhaustion. He called at 6:15 a.m., his voice sharp and angry. Delete that email immediately. I can't keep fighting like this, I said desperately. They're winning. Everything's falling apart. Julia, I need you to listen very carefully to me. I found something important. Their passports. I rubbed my tired eyes. What about them? The stamps don't match their story at all. While they claimed to be living in hostels and struggling, they were on luxury cruises. 4 of them in the last 2 years alone. I sat up straighter with sudden interest. Cruises aren't cheap at all. Exactly. Someone's funding their lifestyle. I just need to find out who and where the money's coming from. He paused meaningfully. Do not send that settlement. Trust me on this. I trusted him. I didn't have another choice at this point. The deposition was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I had to sit across from them in Thorne's conference room and listen to them rewrite our entire history completely. Victor described me as a cruel, cold child who they'd lovingly released at 16 to build my character and independence. We wanted her to be independent and strong, he said, his voice gentle and fatherly. We never abandoned her. We gave her freedom to grow. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Thorne had instructed me not to speak unless asked a direct question, Marie talked about how they'd struggled abroad, how they tried to make their money last, how they'd finally returned home hoping their daughter would welcome them with open arms. "All we want is to be near her," Marie said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue dramatically. "To spend our final years close to family." The stenographer typed every poisonous word. When the lawyers left the room to make copies, Marie leaned across the table. Her voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear clearly. "You were always a burden, Julia. Now you're just a paycheck." I said nothing. But I memorized that moment. That casual, cruel honesty. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept replaying my 16th birthday, the day everything changed forever. Victor had handed me a paper across the kitchen table. "Just sign this quickly," he'd said. "It's a school permission slip so you can live independently while we travel. You're practically an adult anyway." I'd signed it without reading it carefully. I'd trusted him completely. The next day, they were gone. The house was sold. I was completely alone. Over breakfast, I mentioned it to Mark. What if it wasn't just a permission slip? He looked up from his coffee, confused. "What do you mean exactly? What if it was something legal? Something official that would help us now?" Mark grabbed his laptop immediately. "What was it called?" I don't remember clearly. But I was 16. And they left me completely alone after I signed it. He typed quickly, searching. "Julia, there's something called an emancipation decree. If they legally emancipated you, the filial law wouldn't apply. You'd be legal strangers." I called Thorne immediately, my hands shaking with hope. "If that document exists," Thorne said carefully, "it changes everything. But we need the actual document. Where would it be filed?" "County records. They should be digitized by now." I heard typing on his end. "What county were you living in?" "Riverside County." More typing. Then a long silence that made my stomach drop. "The file's corrupted," Thorne finally said with frustration. "The digital record exists, but it won't open. And the physical archives from that year were damaged in a flood 6 years ago." I closed my eyes in disappointment. Of course they were. "But," Thorne continued, his voice changing with hope, "if your parents kept records, and people like them usually do, it might be in that storage unit." Hope flickered in my chest. "Can we get in legally?" "I'm working on it right now. Give me 24 hours. Those were the longest 24 hours of my entire life. Thorne's private investigator broke the lock Saturday morning at 10. "Legally," he explained later, "something about abandoned property and unpaid fees creating a loophole." I waited by my phone anxiously. Mark made coffee neither of us could drink. The PI called at 11:47 a.m. exactly. "It's not furniture," he said, his voice excited. "It's boxes. Financial records going back 30 years. And..." He paused dramatically. "Gold coins. A lot of them. Gold. American eagles. Maybe 200 of them, maybe more. Current market value, roughly $400,000 minimum." I sat down hard on the kitchen floor. They said they had nothing. They lied completely. "I'm photographing everything now. You'll have it within an hour." When the photos came through, I stared at box after box of bank statements, investment records, and a metal case full of gleaming gold coins. "They didn't lose their money," Mark said, looking over my shoulder at my laptop screen. "They hid it." Thorne called Sunday evening, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I found it. A shell company in the Cayman Islands. Set up 17 years ago. How much money?" The most recent statement shows $2.4 million. "They've been depositing money regularly, living off cash and credit," and claiming poverty to everyone. I felt physically sick. They're committing fraud. Yes. They're collecting welfare benefits in 2 different states. They've applied for Medicaid under false pretenses. All while sitting on millions. Thorne's voice was ice cold. They're professional con artists, Julia. You're just their latest mark. What do we do now? We let them lie to the judge. We let them commit perjury under oath in court. Then we destroy them completely. The hardest part was waiting patiently. For 2 agonizing weeks, I had to endure their presence, their smugness, knowing what I knew. Victor called daily with new demands. A car lease. Better hotel accommodations. Designer clothes. Marie sent passive-aggressive texts about how disappointed they were in me. The press coverage continued relentlessly. More protesters appeared daily. More orders cancelled. But I didn't break under the pressure. Because I knew something they didn't. I held the nuclear codes, and soon I'd launch them. The courtroom was packed on hearing day. Victor and Marie arrived in wheelchairs they absolutely didn't need, playing their parts to perfection. The press filled the back rows, cameras ready. The judge, an older woman named Henderson, looked at my parents with visible sympathy. Their lawyer, smooth, expensive, confident, gave an opening statement about the ungrateful daughter who turned her back on the people who gave her life. I sat beside Thorne, my hands folded calmly, my face neutral. Your Honor, their lawyer said with emotion, my clients seek only the bare minimum, a safe place to live and basic medical care. They've spent their lives giving to others. Now they're simply asking their daughter to give back. The gallery murmured approval. I felt dozens of eyes on me, judging me. Judge Henderson nodded sympathetically. Mr. Thorne, your response. Thorne stood slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to reserve my opening statement until after we've heard testimony. Unusual, but acceptable. Victor was called to the stand. He looked genuinely frail as he was helped from his wheelchair. His performance was absolutely perfect, shaking hands, wavering voice. The questioning started gently. Their lawyer walked Victor through their tragic story, the failed investments, the years of struggle abroad, the desperate return home. And now, the lawyer asked softly. What are you asking for? Just a place to rest, Victor said, his voice breaking convincingly. My wife and I, we're not long for this world. We just want to be near our daughter before we go. Several people in the gallery wiped their eyes. Judge Henderson's expression softened noticeably. Then came the critical question, the one Thorne had been waiting for patiently. Mr. Victor, the judge asked directly, do you have any assets, hidden or otherwise, anywhere in the world? Victor's eyes welled with tears perfectly. No, Your Honor. We have absolutely nothing. Just the clothes on our backs and the hope that our daughter will show mercy. The courtroom was completely silent. I watched him lie under oath, his performance flawless and practiced. Judge Henderson turned to Thorne. Mr. Thorne, do you have any questions for this witness? Thorne stood slowly, deliberately. Just a few, Your Honor. He walked to his table and picked up a thick folder. Mr. Victor, I'd like to introduce you to the concept of international banking. Thorne pressed a button on his laptop. The courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying a bank statement. From yesterday. The Cayman Islands account. Balance, $2,450,000. The courtroom gasped collectively. Victor's tears stopped instantly. His face went completely white. That's not. He started weakly. It's your account, Thorne said calmly, clicking to the next slide. Account number 7743-9921-4456. Opened 17 years ago. Regular deposits from the sale of gold coins, which are currently stored in Unit 247 at Nevada Self-Storage. He clicked again. Photos of the storage unit appeared on screen. Boxes of financial records. The case of gold coins gleaming under camera flash. Your Honor, Thorne continued, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, the plaintiffs aren't destitute. They're millionaires who've been committing welfare fraud in 2 states while attempting to extort their daughter. Judge Henderson's face had turned bright red with anger. Is this accurate? Thorne handed her a thick folder. Complete financial records. Bank statements. Photos. The storage unit key was found among their belongings at the Riverside Inn. Victor tried to stand from the witness chair shakily. She must have planted. Sit down immediately, Judge Henderson snapped. Your Honor, Thorne said, I'm not finished yet. He produced another document, yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. This is an emancipation decree, filed 22 years ago with Riverside County. It legally severed all parental rights and obligations when Julia was 16. He handed it to the judge. I could see my signature at the bottom, young, uncertain handwriting. They emancipated her to avoid paying child support, Thorne said, his voice hardening with each word. They legally abandoned her to save money. And now they're trying to use filial responsibility laws to force her to support them. His voice cut like a blade. They're legal strangers to her, Your Honor. This case should never have been filed. The courtroom erupted in absolute chaos. Judge Henderson slammed her gavel repeatedly and forcefully. Order. I will have order in this courtroom. When the room finally quieted, she looked at Victor and Marie with pure, undisguised contempt. You have wasted this court's time. You've committed perjury. You've attempted to defraud both your daughter and the state welfare system. She turned to the bailiff. Secure the doors. No one leaves this courtroom. Your Honor, Victor's lawyer started desperately, if we could have a moment to consult with our clients. No, Judge Henderson cut him off sharply. I'm referring this case immediately to the district attorney for welfare fraud and perjury. Bailiff, place the plaintiffs under arrest immediately. 2 deputies approached Victor and Marie. Marie stood up from her wheelchair, completely forgetting her supposed disability. Wait, she said, her voice strong and clear, no tremor, no weakness. This is a mistake. We can explain everything. You can explain to a jury, the judge said coldly. Victor tried to run desperately. He actually ran, his frailty vanishing as he headed for the courtroom door. A deputy caught him easily, spinning him around and cuffing his hands behind his back. Marie screamed loudly as the other deputy cuffed her wrists. Julia! Help us! We're your parents. You can't let them do this. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as they were led away, both shouting, both promising revenge and lawsuits. Judge Henderson looked directly at me. Miss Julia, I apologize that you had to endure this process. The restraining order is dismissed. All claims are denied with prejudice. Thank you, Your Honor. I stood up slowly. The courtroom was still silent, everyone watching me carefully. Mark took my hand, squeezed it tight. Victor and Marie were by the door now, deputies holding their arms firmly. Marie was still shouting, her voice echoing off the marble walls. After everything we did for you, she screamed desperately. We gave you life. I walked toward them, my footsteps loud in the quiet room. The deputies paused, letting me approach. I looked at my mother, then my father. 2 people I'd loved once, a lifetime ago. You wanted to be taken care of, I said, my voice steady and clear for everyone to hear. The state provides 3 meals a day and a roof over your head in prison. You'll finally get exactly what you wanted. Marie's face crumpled. You can't do this to us. We're family. No, I said firmly. You made sure of that 22 years ago when you signed those papers and left me alone. I turned and walked back to Mark. Behind me, I heard the courtroom door open, heard them being led away, still protesting, still playing victims even now. Judge Henderson called a recess. The reporters rushed out to file their stories, different headlines this time. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining brilliantly. Spring in full bloom, the air smelling like fresh starts and new beginnings. Mark wrapped his arm around me protectively. You okay? I am, I said, and meant it completely. My phone buzzed. Thorne had texted, the DA wants to meet tomorrow. Welfare fraud across multiple states. This case is bigger than we thought. You'll likely be called as a witness at trial. I'd testify. I'd tell the truth. But for now, I just wanted to breathe freely. We walked to the parking lot in comfortable silence. Before getting in the car, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my contacts. Found the entry labeled Mom. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering the 16-year-old who'd called that number for 3 days straight after they left, hoping they'd answer, hoping they'd come back and say it was all a mistake. They never did. I deleted the contact. Deleted Dad, too. Just erased them from my phone like they'd erased me from their lives all those years ago. Ready? Mark asked gently. I looked up at him, this man who'd stood by me through everything, and smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Yeah. Let's go home. We drove away from the courthouse, leaving behind the drama, the lies, the people who'd given me life but never truly loved me. The bakery would recover. The business would rebuild stronger than before. And I would be fine. Better than fine. Because I'd learned something my parents never understood. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who shows up. Who stays. Who chooses you every single day without hesitation. Mark reached over and took my hand as we turned onto Main Street, heading toward Julia's table, toward our life. Toward everything we'd built together through hard work and love. The sun caught the windshield, warm and bright and full of promise. I smiled and squeezed his hand back tightly. I was finally, completely free.